Hello and welcome. It's Kelsey Corey here. I am an emotional fitness coach, the founder of Energy for Impact and the EFI Gym. And amongst a range of other modalities and certifications, I'm an NLP practitioner and very, very grateful and excited to have my NLP trainer, our NLP master practitioner and trainer, Jenna, here with me to go on a modality deep dive into NLP. Jenna, it's such a joy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelsey. I'm so happy to be here.
Yay! And so ever since our paths crossed last year inside of Squirm Free Sales Masters, you were my coach in there, and I've just felt like such a deep connection between us ever since that moment. And to have been evolving along our own paths, but kind of intertwined and getting the opportunity to come and be a part of the Mental Wealth Method, your training, your signature NLP training that you have released into the world. Oh, it's just been a really powerful way for me to have been formally introduced to the construct of NLP, because I've had exposure to it through previous employers who were NLP trained, and then through other modalities that have like inklings or tentacles out into the NLP world. But to be able to be a part of it and have the full realm served up by you has been such a gift. And so, of course, I'm curious to hear from you. How did your journey lead you to NLP?
Well, it kind of feels like it just dropped out of the sky. But before I go into that, I do just want to acknowledge how amazing and full circle it is to be here inside of your gym, Kels, and acknowledge that like it's one of the greatest gifts to be able to watch people that have graduated from the Mental Wealth Method go out and share it further. And I love everything that you're doing here.
Oh,
I didn't know that you had previous people in your life that were NLP trained, so that's super interesting to know a little bit about where it comes from for you. But for me, it really came from a place of wanting to find a tool to help myself when things were a little bit rocky in my own mental health. I had been trying a lot of different things. I had done art therapy, I had done talk therapy, I had done a lot of different self-help, self-care type of things, but I just felt like, what if there was a tool out there that could allow me to like work directly with my mind and could help me like break through some of the stuff I haven't been able to necessarily break through just by talking about stuff from my past and different seasons of grief in my life. And a few weeks after just having that thought that kind of felt like it came out of nowhere, I started to hear NLP in like every single podcast I listened to. It just started to drop into everything. And eventually, like it was a few times before I actually Googled like, what is NLP? And when I Googled it and found out Neuro-Linguistic Programming, I still had no idea what that meant. But then it was a podcast that was like breaking down like what could happen when you work through limiting beliefs with NLP. I was like, I don't even know exactly what this is still, but I just know I want to do it. And I felt a really strong pull to it. And I actually went to a certification that was 1 week in person and wanted it to just be able to have tools in my own toolkit to take care of myself, but then was there and it was getting so deep and it was so powerful and the shift was so real that I was like, this is too good to keep to myself. So I decided to become a coach in that moment, and sort of like was telling everyone what I was doing on Instagram and just said like, I'm opening up 10 spots to see if this is like a good fit. And they all went like that because people were like telling me they could see a change in like my eyes. Honestly, they could see the shift happening on Instagram, and people that knew me from the rough time I was having with my own mental health and going through a season of grief, they got to witness that transformation, and they were like, whoa, like there's a walking testimonial for you. So yeah, that was the start of it, and it's just been rolling ever since.
It's so beautiful that it's from your own personal growth and transformation, and it's a similar sense. And I think this is the power of when we find something that really works for us, the opportunity to then share it with others, it's like, it's not even a question of if, it's like how and when, and just kind of incorporating. I know that, like, with your background in art therapy as well, like having these additional tools, and that's the way I love to work as well. It's like bring a range of tools and modalities together to formulate and kind of create your own expression and impact and approach to it. So then what was it that, when did you go from being like, okay, I'm loving being a coach, I'm loving having this impact, this has helped me a lot, I love helping people, let me take this to the trainer level?
Yeah, that moment it caught me by surprise, because I actually honestly wasn't that far into being certified. So I was certified at the practitioner level early summer, went to my master prac level early fall, and then by Thanksgiving I was out at my dad's, and I just like woke up literally. This feels like such a cheesy story, but I mean, I believe in downloads and intuitive nudges, and I just like woke up in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., and heard like what sounded like my voice saying like, it's time to become a trainer. And I was like, there's no way, like, why me? I just became a coach, and at that point I had already had the privilege to work with, I think it was close to like 45 people by that point. And because I was just like, I did 10 spots like right when I got home from my training, because I just wanted to share this with as many people as possible. So I was at that point like, yes, it's only been 45 people, but I was at that moment of like starting to see some of the changes that had happened over the course of the months since working with someone. I think it was really like, yes, the intuitive download, but also the witnessing the transformation that was happening, not just for myself, but for others. I mean, like, this really works. And what if more people knew about it? And what if more people had more options of like how to be trained in NLP, and like could take that approach that you're talking about, Kels, when we see things through our own lens, everyone delivers things just a little bit differently. And I felt really inspired to follow that, even though it truly scared me at first. I was like, felt like it was a huge undertaking, but it's been something I've been moving from with a lot of trust ever since. And now that we're here, like, I can confirm that I feel like I made the right decision. I'm so grateful that I followed that nudge.
So am I. I'm really grateful too, and I know that other members on the call are also mental wealth method graduates, and so I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of us that we're really grateful that you lent into that. And the beauty of it is that a really big part of what NLP supports you to do is to become the version of you that you desire to be, to change your identity, to step into being who and how you want to be in the world. And so you are a living, breathing example of it. So it's just gorgeous. I love it. I love it. And I think that as we go into, before we go too much further, to give a little context to anyone who is still kind of going NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, what is this? I know that one of the things that has helped me to kind of piece it together is like to understand that the neuro aspect is your mind, and it's the way in which your nervous system, which is very much what your mind is connected with, how it processes, we process our experience of the world through our 5 senses. So it's kind of the information coming in, and then the linguistic is the language, is the way that we put form and meaning, both internally, the self-talk that we have, and then the expression that we take out into the world, and how much the language we choose to use is a reflection of our belief system, of our identity, of what we know to be true. And that's where the programming piece comes in, because it is those patterns, it's those paradigms, it's the beliefs that we have about ourselves, about the world, and all of it comes together for NLP to be this incredible modality that helps you just to better understand all of that and to see it in the context of who and how you're being, and then equips you with a range of different techniques and approaches and kind of tools that can be applied to help shift that. So help build new habits, help shift beliefs, and really help to create that new identity that you're stepping into. And it, by no means is it an easy thing. There's still, of course, like the work to do there, but it really helps. It's helped me immensely come to understand the depth of the relationship between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And literally just recently, I was in a session as a client, and it was a beautiful moment of helping, who I'm calling Team Kelsey, my conscious and subconscious minds, my subconscious parts. We kind of talk a lot about like parts work and parts integration, and that's a beautiful tangent that we could go off and explore. But from the perspective of the subconscious experience that you're having, hugely impacting the conscious experience that you're having, and that when you work to allow both aspects to get airtime, to hold space for them and to listen inwardly, that to me is when that integration happens and we're able to show up in the way that we want to be showing up to. So I guess I'll pause there and just ask, is there anything you want to throw in there in terms of setting the context of NLP?
I feel like you just did such a beautiful job. It was amazing. And like being able to look at it from that perspective of like, it gives you the tools to be able to step into is such a great way to look at it, because it requires the work. But as you were talking, I was thinking about like the processing of talk therapy happened, for me at least, in my experience, happened on a very conscious level, and then being able to dive into the subconscious also, I think of it as like you go down to the root, and when you go down to the root of a thing, it allows you to maybe clear some space that's been occupying for just a little bit too long, or you're ready to move away from, and having the tools to be able to help that transformation along is so powerful.
Yep, and it really it accelerates.
Yeah.
It, because it's, when the analogy of cutting a weed or pulling it out from the root kind of thing, like you're going to create that sustainable change. And sustainable change is something from my EFT certification we spoke a lot about, because you can put band-aids on things, but when you really want to heal, when you really want to transform, and you don't want to have to come back to it and keep tending to it, that's just the gold of coming into those subconscious experiences, because it never ceases to amaze me how, whether we're using any of the techniques, really, like time techniques in particular is a really powerful one, where we can go back and connect with these like completely intangible emotional like anchors that we've got in our past that our conscious mind has no connection with. And then all of a sudden we're in this space where it's allowed to come up to the surface, and it's there, and we just have that opportunity to transmute that energy, right? Our emotions, energy in motion, that's just the whole process of it. So I guess I've shared a little bit around how NLP has been really helpful and supportive to me, and particularly also the anchoring aspect I will talk to. And I'd like to invite you to mention the way in which you have brought anchoring into its own, taken your own experience and created a range of anchoring. But what has NLP been, I guess, from an approach for you personally, and then perhaps some stories and some shares around your flavor of NLP, or the new wave of NLP as it's coming through?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned in the beginning, with the intention being to go in and be able to support myself, like wanting to work through, I went in with the intention of really wanting to work through things from my past and wanting to go into those roots. So like takes a certain level of being ready to do that and ready to acknowledge that. And I was grateful enough to be able to be like matched with incredible practice partners at that week-long experience, and it just amazed me how quick it could happen. But when I was out in the world, like back at home, like I think warming people up to their subconscious mind took a little bit more time. And I found that one of the most transformational tips you can give someone when they're starting to work with that part of themselves is like warming up the subconscious mind. And instead of just like asking, with time techniques, for example, like instead of just asking like, Do you remember the first time that you felt that you couldn't talk on a stage, or just something like that, right? Going back to the root of like having any sort of anxiety around speaking around people. Instead of just asking a question like that and asking for the answer to come up, right? Like having a more like playful approach has really, really helped me. So I started to ask people questions like, do you remember the color of your first bicycle? Do you remember what your grandparents' house smelled like? Do you remember how, or what the last song on the radio was? Like, what did you last hear, right? And what that does is it activates our subconscious recall, because one of the most fascinating things for me is learning about how we have an archive of all the things that we experience, but our conscious mind can only handle so much, so our subconscious is filtering it out. So knowing that our subconscious is doing so much work for us, I just wanted to develop this relationship. So I start to talk a lot about like becoming BFFs with your subconscious mind and having this playful approach. So for me, in my own personal experience, it was just how I ask other people those questions to warm up their subconscious, having that kind of internal dialogue with myself, and having it be a day-to-day thing where, as you were saying, the part of you that it was on Team Kelson is the conscious awareness and the subconscious awareness, they're working together. So bridging that dialogue so they're always in communication is, I think, the biggest thing that I would say. And approaching it with a playfulness and a compassion, and like just an understanding that even though we're maybe uncovering some really deep stuff, that it is ready to be resolved and it is ready to come to the surface, and it can be done with love and compassion. And then like by finding that, we have a chance to start to bring these techniques that we have in our toolkit to be able to resolve stuff, and bring integration and bring a sense of wholeness. So to go a little bit deeper into the techniques, we can in a minute, but I just want to give that framework of like the friendship before going into the techniques and the anchoring. But do you have anything you want to say before I jump in?
I just really love how you've referenced the playfulness, the lightness, the enjoyment that can come from all of this. I think that when people consider working on themselves or doing the work or changing, a need to change, a lot of it can come from that place of force. And a lot of what I've learned for myself, and then I'm hoping to share, and I'm hoping that this is what comes through with what I share, is that it can come from this place of love, and it can come from this place of instead of feeling like you're not enough and lack, it's this sense of abundance of like, who can I be? Who can I become? How can I achieve all these visions and dreams that I have? And how do I unlearn what I learned previously? And one of the biggest parts of understanding beliefs that has been really, really helpful for me is that a belief or a pattern or a strategy or a paradigm, when they were created, they were exactly what we needed at that time. There was a part of us, there was a function to it, there was a purpose to it, and it served that. And as we've gone along, we've just believed that that was how we've had to stay being. And all of a sudden we're over here and we're a whole different version of ourselves. We've had a number of new experiences. We've grown, we've learned, we've evolved, we're doing different things. But that part of us still believes that that is the way in which to handle these experiences, or is holding on to an emotional experience, a memory, and is really deeply connected to it. So when we can, as you're saying, like come at it from a friendship perspective, from a loving, caring, compassionate perspective and approach, and just saying, hey, let me help you understand who we are now, who we're becoming. Let me understand what you need, and let's do this as the team and move forward from there. I really wanted to add that in there because it was such a beautiful and important moment. So thank you for sharing that. And I think that was really, that was fun. I was glad that we got that chance.
That's so good. And I know with like being able to continue that like love and patient and just positive outlook of like, what can we be? I love the way that you just said that, right? Like talking like trying to heal a past, but what happens when you start to clear up stuff from the past, you start to really be able to imagine what else can be. And that's the beautiful thing, and like where the name mental wealth comes from is like, what's the next step above mental health is mental wealth, and how can things be more abundant, and what's the future that you can imagine for yourself. And some of the more tangible tools that I use in NLP on a day-to-day basis to remind myself to work with like building those neural pathways of positivity and love and just positive self-talk is, as you were hinting at, anchoring. And specifically, I love to work with scent, because in the history of NLP, it works a lot with our visual, our auditory, and our kinesthetic, but it doesn't go too far into olfactory and gustatory. But as I was going through
let me just interrupt you. Visual, auditory, hearing, kinesthetic, touch, feel. Because pre NLP training, I hadn't heard olfactory, I hadn't heard gustatory. I'm like, what? So olfactory being the smell and gustatory being taste.
I still just like zoom past. I appreciate you. But being able to tap into other senses. So I felt really called to explore scent and started playing around with essential oils with people I was having sessions with and myself to like only have a specific scent that I would use before every coaching call or coaching session when I would meet people publicly in a park or in my office. And what happened there is that every time I use that scent, my body and my nervous system started to remember like, oh, it's time to go into coaching mode. And that built up this really positive association with this specific scent. And I could see it was sort of like a button or an anchor, what we would call it in NLP, which is typically used as like pressing on a knuckle or pulling on an earlobe or like using a song as an anchor. But the thing about our olfactory system and working with our sense of smell is that it's strongly linked to memory and emotion. And that's why, like, when I ask you, like, do you remember what your grandparents' house smelled like? It can take you right back because we have such a vivid connection.
It did.
Did it for you too?
Yep. Home baked bread. It took me straight back. It was like, oh, yes.
Right. And it's that recall is so strong for people, and it's our only sense that is linked to that memory and that emotion processing centers in our brain, the amygdala and hippocampus. So it's unique. So what if we use anchoring with this unique part of our brain and do what happens naturally, but on purpose for things like feeling confident on a coaching call or
and it's funny because through the training, like we have the inhalers, and I've got it's a blend of lavender and peppermint in here, and this is when I'm wanting to feel calm and confident. So it's literally a matter of inhaling it, and it's a beautiful technique. So
I love that. Lavender is so calming, and the peppermint takes it up a notch. Just perfect. Ooh. But yeah, so like little things like that. And then also just really developing my, what's the best word for it? I feel like consistency, no, not consistency, my practice in repetition. Like that's been one of the biggest things of working with the subconscious mind, is knowing what the repetition that it needs and feeling like putting things in my path and making things easy, because we want to, on a subconscious level, follow the path of least resistance when we're trying new things. So that's why it can take some time to like get a new habit that really sticks, or do that rerouting to really land in a new place. So little tiny things, like if I'm working on something brand new, literally putting it in my path and making it a thing that I see, or setting alarms to like do the reminder, because I know that there's a certain amount of time that it takes for those new neural pathways to be created, and it gets stronger and stronger as time goes on. So on a day-to-day basis, it's really tiny, manageable things. And then when life is happening and like I feel like a ping or an emotion that's like, ooh, like something's not right, then I have all these tools to be able to go deeper into like time traveling or moving around on my timeline and going back into the past or out into the future, or working even more specifically with those senses and how they create pictures and internal representations inside of our mind's eye. And like with NLP, we can kind of tweak those to also work with the belief system. So having things that allow me to go deeper, but then having these everyday, small, playful, delightful, daily activities to just really help me go after my goals. And I think that's another thing to mention too, is the goal setting aspect. I never used to be someone that like set specific goals, and I know that there's a lot of different opinions about like whether that is a good thing or not, but for me, like even if you don't love the word goal, like being able to spend time out in the future, let's put it that way, being able to get clear about what it is that you want, because we live in a society where we're really clear about what we don't want, but there's not a lot of people who ask us like, but what do you want? So spending time there is the other really big thing.
And the beauty of that and the challenge with that, so two sides of the same coin, is giving ourselves permission to want what we want, and to lean into it, and to explore when the blocks come up of, I couldn't possibly have that, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, any of those deeply ingrained senses that many of us are holding towards what we want, towards those outcomes that we desire. And I think it's, you've said it exactly, it's like having the range of tools to be able to create change towards that perception, towards that belief, both on the smaller incremental process, like in that way, and then also in that kind of in that kind of deeper exploration as well. And there was something that, let me just kind of come back to it, you were mentioning just before we went into kind of bringing up the goals, you were talking about the little things that you do during the day. And I've got an acronym that I use. I haven't really formally used it much in Energy for Impact in terms of the gym, but with one-on-one clients, we talk about this a lot. And it's practicing with love, little, often, varied, and enjoyable. And it's taking that approach. And when we do that, and when we have, and I love that you said you're literally putting it in your path, because it does take some time to build up those new ways of thinking and approaching, especially on that subconscious level. So all of it, I think everything we've spoken about just kind of gets encapsulated there in that approach of love. So I love it. So I've referenced it already, but I'm curious for you to put it in your own terms. And this is something that's really fun and evolving, this new wave of NLP, right? Like what's coming out with this? What does that mean?
Yeah, so it started in your round of the mental wealth method, and the term came from just really feeling like, I think we're starting to do something a little bit differently here. And the wavelength of love, really knowing that like NLP is a powerful tool, and all powerful tools can be used in different ways. And coming down to a few different sides of it is like, one, the training itself is like doing NLP differently, but then also the way that we're using NLP with our clients is happening differently. So as a training, right, like typically people do follow an accelerated model where they like learn very quickly, don't really have too much time to like implement, but they have their certificate and then they're out in the world practicing or weaving it into what they're already doing, or like trying it for the first time without much like supervision or feedback or critique or help or evaluation or anything. So making it longer, having it be an extended training, and requiring people to have certain amounts of practice hours, to have practice partners that they're swapping with so that they can be on the receiving side, and also facilitating it so they have a chance to ask their questions. That has been something different that we have done. And because it's an unregulated field at this time, right, like to do an accelerated training is okay at this moment. I mean, I think there's even like courses online. You can become an NLP practitioner for like $50. It's like a 3-hour course. Like, it's really all over the map. So in the new wave of NLP, we go deeper, and it also is just like about really dropping in and being there for that person. And that translates into being in a client session and really listening to them and moving at a pace that feels good for them, but then empowering them to work with their subconscious mind and teaching them about their subconscious mind and showing them like everything that we're doing with them. We're like the tour guide with the answers that they already have inside of them. So it's very different than like trying to make someone believe like that they have to work only with a practitioner, or like it's a thing, a relationship that's going to need to continue. Like, I think there's a big level of empowerment that comes from our new wave of NLP, of wanting people to walk away feeling like they really understand this part of themselves in a new way. But also like to acknowledge that, like the senses, for example, too, like having traditionally focused on visual, auditory, and the kinesthetic, and then adding in olfactory, sense of smell, and gustatory, sense of taste, we're opening it up to just like catch anyone else who might, you know, be more tuned into those senses. So little tiny tweaks like that. But overall, the biggest thing is consent, and just moving forward with consent and moving forward with clear communication, because NLP and working with the subconscious mind can be a bit tricky sometimes, can be a bit persuasive. And in the darker corners of NLP, that's what it's used for. There's like, you know, pickup artists that train in NLP. And it's like, what happens when we take that to the extreme and let people know exactly what's happening and asking, like, is that okay? So they're also learning about their subconscious mind while being aware each step of the way, like what is happening.
And I think you captured that in that word empowerment. It really is like, I love the metaphor of like teaching a person to fish rather than just giving them fish, you know, each session, here's another fish. It's like, no, let me educate you, right? Like an approach I like to use as well is like education, experimentation, then integration. So it's truly about like, because we're needing to speak to the conscious mind for a lot of the education pieces, like helping you make sense of it and helping you understand it. Whereas the subconscious is where we need to experiment, we need to experience it, we need to feel it, we need to have that experience, and then allow all of that to integrate and bring about that change. And therefore people are so much more likely and committed to and interested to actually go through and apply and do the doing outside of a session, because so much of sessions, and the beauty of it is truly that tour guide analogy of like helping people kind of come to their own conclusions where they've just been caught up in the whirl of it all, and then they get that clarity, and then from that comes aligned action. And so it's like, how do you move forward with that, and where do you go with that, and helping them kind of apply those and providing that sense of support. And I will definitely, you know, acknowledge that coming into an extended training and having that additional time, having the support from yourself, like to be able to come and ask questions and say, how does this work? And what would you do here? And the collaborative experience of that in the group as well, like knowing that this was, and that what you're offering is completely virtual training opportunities, like the way in which you still create this sense of community and this sense of collaboration between the group is just divine. It's just so special during these times, right? To be able to have that, and to know then that when you do go out into the world and start working with clients, you have a resource, you have a community, you have people you can come back to and have that sense of support. Like as an alumni, you know, that is a really valuable thing to have. So I thank you. I thank you for the way in which you are bringing NLP to the world, and excited to be a part of it. Man, we could be here and talk about this all day, every day. I know that there were a couple of stories of the impact that you wanted to share, as well as kind of, I guess, like touch on a few examples of how, you know, NLP and the subconscious mind can really integrate with our physical, our mental, our spiritual, emotional, social health, like how it all kind of combines together. So I guess that will probably come out in the stories.
Okay, cool. So I just really want to share one story, like just one story that I think is my favorite story to share, and it kind of breaks down like talking about how a limiting belief could show up and how working through a process of like seeing someone on the other side, to just put everything we're saying into a real life example from a client that I worked with, that was 12 years old and went to their mom and said, like, I feel like I can't make friends in real life. They had a thriving art presence online and like little art communities online and virtual friends, but has this history of like moving from school to school to school. And in September, this is a few years ago now, at the beginning of the school year, they were just like, Mom, like I'm feeling like, what if I can't make friends this year, in real life friends? And we had an NLP session, we booked it, and I mean, that was the first 12-year-old that I ever worked with, and it melted my heart to be able to be like, this is so powerful to share tools at this stage in someone's life. But it took a minute to like get into it, but as soon as they were able to explain like what that felt like for them, I was able to get to a place of like, but what would you actually want to feel instead? And in NLP, like the linguistic of NLP, really listening to other people's words and using exactly what they say is one of the most important parts. And in their words, they said, I really just want to be a social butterfly. And it still makes me emotional to talk about it, because being able to then take those two statements, right? I feel like I can't make friends in real life, but I really want to be a social butterfly. And taking this as the limiting belief, and this is the new belief that they would like to believe, and being able to work our subconscious magic with a technique called single belief change, where you take that belief that you no longer want to believe and you actually map it across to a part of the brain that stores beliefs that are no longer true. And you take the new belief and you map it across to a part of the brain that holds the absolutely true beliefs, like the sun will come up tomorrow, grass is green, sky is blue, like factual stuff. And we had the session together, and it was hard to gauge, like, you know, being with a 12-year-old, I'm just like not totally sure, like, how did that feel? But it went well, we wrapped it up. But the true magic is like 1 week later, we had another session, and they told me like that they had swapped numbers with someone. They had a new friend to walk home from school with, which was a huge win. But a month after that, I heard from their mom that they ran for class president at this brand new school. So talk about being a social butterfly, right? Going from not feeling like you could make friends in real life to then running for class president. And that story of just like the subconscious level of change that happens, I think is a powerful example of like what can happen for someone young, but I've seen happen for so many people, all ages, from all backgrounds, from all walks of life. And that time factor of like really being able to see what happens a month later, it sneaks up on you. Subconscious work sneaks up on you.
Yeah. It compounds over time, right? And then all of a sudden you kind of look back and be like, whoa.
Exactly.
Whoa. This is incredible. Oh, I love that.
That's my favorite story. I don't know if you have any stories that you love to share, Kels, of like examples or that can help us roll into the overall well-being.
Yeah, for sure. So one of them, and I will, I think this would be the most appropriate to kind of like connect us into the holistic realm of well-being, but it's the self-talk component. And it really is about like where your language goes, where your mind goes. And, you know, I can speak from my own experience, and I've got 2 clients in my mind right now that I'm kind of going, okay, I know that this has been a really big shift for them as well, from that sense of how you receive what's happening or what you're doing, and the way that you speak to yourself about it, and replacing that judgment and that harshness and that cruelty that is all too often to come up from internal, and really leaning into that sense of acceptance and kindness and compassion and saying, well, okay, then if we're here, what do we need to get to the other side? And it's such, it's the kind of shift that is hard to put words to, ironically, when we're talking about self-talk, but it's that visceral sensation of like when you look yourself in the eye in the mirror, and it's just a totally different feeling. So one of these clients, we did some mirror work with it, right? Like that, there really is the power of that, and it's like the affirmations on the mirror and that opportunity just to, it's the repetition, it's the practice, it's the consistency, and it shows up in body language, it shows up in behavior, it shows up in the outcomes and the results that we're getting. Little shifts, but they're not little. That's the thing. The impact of them is not little. They may feel insignificant, or they may feel like, oh, okay, but it is it sneaks up and it just like transforms. So yeah.
I love that. That's amazing. And that does impact every single area of your life.
Everything. Yeah. Yeah, and there's like, I guess, like from the physical, it's like how we receive ourselves, how we hold ourselves, how we treat ourselves from a physical perspective, right? Like the thought loops that we're having, the processes, and it's that acknowledgement that like subconscious thoughts. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Often we hear it's, your thoughts, then it's your feelings, then it's your behaviors, and it's your results, and that truly is like the NLP communication model, right? Like that's how it happens. But so often people think that the thoughts are the conscious ones, and it's like actually so much of it is at that subconscious level, and it's about learning to tune in and to listen and to be patient, as you said, like holding that space for those parts of you to share what their true thoughts are about the experience of it all. And when you start to see and feel the shifts in that, ooh,
I think that this would be an awesome time to do that example of like showing just how much your subconscious mind is responsible for sifting through. And so for anyone here with us live or on the replay, if you are imagine you're in a chair that can spin 360 degrees around the room that you're in. And that's all the information from every single direction, from floor to ceiling, or if you're outside, literally every single detail that your subconscious mind has to filter for you. But it has to get it down to an amount that you can consciously handle, so we're not in a constant state of overwhelm. So how you would actually give us this ratio of like, this is what the subconscious mind is filtering through. You'd cover one eye and you take a tiny little pinhole with your pointer finger and your thumb with your other hand, and you'd look through that, and you would fix your seat so that you can no longer spin. And what you see through that tiny little speck is what your conscious mind ends up with. And the important thing to remember about that is that when that's happening, your subconscious mind is filtering through filters that have been there for you since age 0 to 7. When you were born and you were just downloading information, you're essentially a walking subconscious mind from when you were born to age 7, and we were just downloading other people's beliefs, other people's value systems, social norms, things that we see out in the world, things that we hear on the radio, things that we take in at school, what have you. And being able to know that that's all being filtered through to serve those belief and value systems we already have, it creates a completely unique experience for every single individual based on what you've lived through and what you have experienced. And on top of that, all of it is being deleted, distorted, and generalized to serve what's already true for you. And that's why it can take a lot of time and repetition to introduce those new thoughts, or to be in front of the mirror and see it change. But as you're saying, Kels, like it's not the conscious thoughts that are like coming up and, disturbing us. Those subconscious ones are coming from a place of still serving things that you decided like way back long ago that, like you said earlier on this call, you've since outgrown.
Yeah.
And it's not true for you anymore. It just doesn't line up, but it's still trying to protect you. It's still trying to love you. It's still trying to feed what it thinks your model of the world is. And sometimes it just needs a loving reminder and some grease and work to be like, we're going to choose something new. We're going to.
And I love to reference that the way that I've taken it and that I understand it and like to experience it now is that your emotions are the language of your subconscious mind. So they are the way that it is trying to get your attention, like trying to appear in that, get your attention. You become emotional. It's your energy in motion trying to communicate to you that there is a part of you subconsciously who doesn't agree, doesn't align, is like, no, I need you to understand something here. And that's what it is. It's a communication of information. And so that's the beauty of when we become more aware, when we tune in and we practice acknowledging what our experience is and accepting it as it is, right? Not fighting those emotions, not saying like, go away, you're not welcome here. It's like, it's coming up for a reason. So accept it and then work with it, right? And assist it to shift so that then you can realign and come back to what you're wanting, how you're wanting to be, or what you're wanting to do, how you're wanting to show up. Because the more we push it away and suppress it, the more it's going to be persistent, and we just have that internal battle with ourselves, right? Whereas if we just allow it to shift, and sometimes it takes time, sometimes it can happen quickly, sometimes it does take time, sometimes there's change that you need to make to the approach that you're taking. So it's just, you can't change too quickly too. Sometimes the nervous system can become very dysregulated, right? Our nervous system, our subconscious mind, all connected. We try to create change too abruptly, won't allow it. But then when it does give itself permission, when you do work with yourself to change it, you can really just appreciate the whole experience, right? Those, as you said earlier, whatever comes up is ready to be processed. It's ready to be shifted and changed. And I just, we really could talk about this on and on and on and on. For the purposes of our time and being able to open up to the members on the call and have a bit more of an informal chat and answer any of their questions that have come up from this and provide some clarity. I guess I'm just kind of checking our little run sheet that we had here with all the amazing things. Do you feel, Jenna, that there is anything that you would like to add here that would feel unfinished if you didn't add into this conversation, this beautiful conversation?
I guess the only thing is that, if you're watching this and you have a spark of inspiration of wanting to explore your subconscious mind, I think the biggest thing I want to leave you with is that it can be from that place of love. It can be playful. It can be fun. And some of the mysterious or is that so far out there energy and reputation that it has, it just let that fall away, because it can really be a very beautiful relationship. I think we all have the chance to be able to experience, because it's not anywhere else. It's already right here, and that's one of the greatest gifts that you can give yourself. So if you're feeling that spark of inspiration to learn more, to tap in, follow it, because it can be there to support you the rest of your life.
And I love that it links so beautifully. Often at the end of a gym session, I'll say thank you for showing up for you today. No, in the way that only you can, because truly, no one else can be BFFs with your subconscious, right? Only you. And it truly is. It's when we nurture the relationship with ourselves, then everything in our life changes, right? So thank you for everything you've shared today. It's just such a joy to get to continue collaborating and learning from you and with you and bouncing and sharing and anyone who is interested to learn more about what Jenna does, if you're interested to explore the mental wealth method, the next program will be in January of 2022. So there is a wait list that you can jump on. There is information that I'll be sharing wherever you're watching this, however you're watching this, that'll be in the notes below it. And for members, I'll be sharing it with you all as well.
Thank you, Kelsey, so much for having me. This is a beautiful conversation, and I appreciate you and all the work that you do in this world. It's so important.
Oh, love it. Love it. And I'll just throw in like how much of a joy it is being able to support you inside of the EFI gym, right? Like I love that you are a member and that it's something that myself and the other instructors have the opportunity to hold a space for you, because it would kind of be remiss to not acknowledge right now just how essential it is as coaches that we are allowing ourselves to be supported, that we are showing up for ourselves and building these times in to be able to support ourselves and our systems, so that we are coming from that place of fullness to be able to show up for others. So
absolutely.
Love ya. Love you, love you, love you. Yay!